The first three Die Hard films are a beloved set of action movies. The first is a perfect action movie, with the following two sequels being solid entries. During the 90s, Fox was very interested in having their IPs made into a variety of video games. Die Hard received a few game adaptations, and the first one on the PS1 was an ambitious title that tackled the first three films, providing unique gameplay for each one. This project was taken on by a younger set of developers, who did not have any experience with the PS1 or making games in 3D. They faced many challenges as they tried to manage their ideas and deliver on their vision. Join me as we take a look back at the Die Hard trilogy. In 1994, Fox Interactive was formed as the video game publishing arm of Fox Entertainment. This publisher would be focused on producing games that were based on 20th Century Fox properties like Alien and The Simpsons. Fox Interactive made a deal with the developer Probe Entertainment to make an Alien game. Probe had a history of adapting popular IPs into video games. Their Alien title would be called Alien Trilogy and focused on first-person shooting. The studio aimed to combine the plot of the first three Alien films into a single storyline. At the same time, Fox's TV show department had a new show in development called The Scavengers, and the gaming arm of Fox wanted Probe to make an adaptation on it to release with the show. It was cited that the founder of Probe said that by the time they found out that the show was going to be awful, they were already committed to the project. The ratings for the TV show were so bad that Fox ended up canceling both the show and the game as well. The Fox executives had the idea to transfer the resources from this project to one based on Die Hard with a Vengeance. Probe Entertainment wanted to take this idea even further, and they wanted to develop a game that would feature all three of the Die Hard films, and would hopefully top the prior Die Hard based games. Alien Trilogy was the main focus for the studio with the veteran team, and a smaller team was working on this Die Hard project. The Die Hard team was largely inexperienced, but they made up for it with their enthusiasm. The leadership at Probe Entertainment informed their team that they had acquired the license to Die Hard, and this young team had a lot of experience with 2D sprite-based games, and making a 3D game was definitely going to be unknown territory for them. What also made the planning period interesting was that at the time, Die Hard 3 had not been released in cinemas, and Probe had no idea what the film's narrative or set pieces were really going to focus on. The smaller team worked on several prototypes to find something that could work for their game. Some gameplay ideas were tested from shooting elements to driving sequences. This early version also saw the player being able to leave their vehicle, walk around the city, and interact with other objects and vehicles. Probe presented their early ideas to Fox executives, and they were not pleased with any of the progress so far, so the developers decided to go in another direction. Instead of one game that was going to be based on Die Hard 3, they wanted to pursue an interesting idea of providing three games in one package. Each of the three Die Hard movies would take on a unique gameplay style. Die Hard 1 would be a third-person shooter where the player would ascend the Nakatomi Plaza Tower, defeating all the terrorists along the way. Die Hard 2 would be a departure from this style where the action would be in the form of a first-person rail shooter. The driving prototype took the form as the main means of gameplay for Die Hard 3, and they had access to the movie script at this time for reference. The developers knew that they were being very ambitious with their direction. With a new vision for the project, Fox was relatively hands-off, and let the team explore these ideas without much much management involvement. Members of the studio described the development as a free-for-all, with new features being suggested in the morning and then implemented by the end of the day. Some were even included as funny details, like how you can run over civilians in Die Hard 3 and the wipers would then wipe away the blood. The team's largest challenge came back to their goal for the project, to tackle 3 distinct gameplay styles for each of the Die Hard films. At one point in development, the studio felt that they were stretched a bit too thin to really properly see this vision through. This resulted in the developers getting creative to really fulfill that vision. For example, Die Hard 3 would feature large cities for the missions, and the original buildings were too large for the game to handle that detail, on top of all the action. So this meant that the team would make small sections of the map while having a system that would auto-generate more of the map as the player drove through it. While making the hostages and terrorists, the developers were not happy with the faces of them, and this resulted in the team inserting their own faces to be those NPCs. The Die Hard trilogy was an ambitious project for a young set of developers, but it also showed how this team was able to creatively solve the problems and challenges they faced. Essentially creating 3 different games in one package is no easy task, but the developers embraced the challenge to achieve their vision. In August 1996, Die Hard Trilogy was released to the world. Die Hard Trilogy is an interesting game in that it's a collection of 3 arcade games in one package. Die Hard 1 is easily the best of the bunch and the most replayable of them. The action is generally good with the freedom to tackle each of the levels how you want to. Die Hard 2 is a rail shooter and it is pretty fun, but the lack of light gun support is an odd choice. Die Hard 3 is easily the weakest of the collection. It is focused on driving, but the controls and the car handling are rather weak. This game also has some of the worst voice acting, but thankfully it lands in that so bad it's good territory, so it adds some extra entertainment value. Die Hard Trilogy is a janky and underrated game that mostly delivers on its arcade premise.
I don't like to lose. Please, let me drive. Happy trails. Supposed to stay in your seats until the plane reaches the terminal. Please, let me drive.
Help me!
Please, let me drive. Want to stay alive? Stay with me. Hold tight, this is gonna get bumpy. Supposed to stay in your seats until the plane reaches the terminal.
Me again, McClay.
Die Hard 1 plays like a run-and-gun third-person shooter. You can shoot, strafe, roll, jump, and throw grenades. The shooting is all done with the use of an auto-aim. If you are facing the enemy, you are more than likely to hit them. The aiming can be a bit wonky, with your bullets not always registering to your target. Thankfully, the impact of your hits is what keeps the shooting enjoyable. There is a generous amount of blood, along with decent sound effects for the guns. I found the game to be best played in one of 2 ways. Either you hug the walls for cover and play more conservatively, or you are always on the move and use the strafe and roll a lot. If the enemy ever catches you standing still, you're going to take a lot of damage. There is a pretty cool effect where a crosshair will pop up in the corner of the screen to indicate that you are about to be shot, and this sort of reminds me of the damage meter from the Siphon Filter games. There's plenty of items to aid you, like new guns, medkits, body armor, and a lot more. There's also a good variety of weapons, from a pistol to different machine guns, shotguns, among others. I was impressed with how much of the environments are destructible. You can shoot glass and some walls. These are not just there for a cool effect, but they can be used to open up alternative paths. The most impressive aspect of Die Hard 1 is how the levels are rather open. You are free to explore and tackle them as you see fit. This allows for a lot of personalization in how you complete your objectives, along with allowing for a lot of replay value, meaning that if you choose to go in a different direction at the start of a level, the entire thing can play out very differently. There's a decent amount of exploration with this as well, as you find items and weapons to help you out. In addition, I enjoyed the visual differences in the levels along with the layouts of the locations. You are stuck in the hotel just like in the movie, but they play around with this space enough to keep the action fresh. The objectives are to kill the terrorists, rescue the hostages, and defuse the bomb. Some levels will throw in a stronger boss-like enemy to change things up, along with having hostages that are being escorted or stationary. When it comes to the flaws, the general feel of the action along with controlling John can be a bit janky. This is really seen when trying to shoot people sometimes, as you will be aiming right at someone but your shots will be missing because they didn't register. Another thing that annoyed me was how there is this large annoying timer that pops up when you need to defuse the bomb. This large font should be used at first and then only be something that is seen at the corner of the screen so that it doesn't impair your vision while you're searching for the bomb. Something else that makes this game very enjoyable are the cheat codes for Die Hard 1. There's some silly ones like having John fat or having dead enemies fly up into the air. Probably my favorite code is the silly mode, which causes enemies to turn around, stick their butts at you, and aim their guns through their legs to shoot you. This looks ridiculous and it's hilarious. Overall, the action is still really good here with some issues. While it is very challenging, I found myself coming back to this over and over again because the action was solid and I enjoyed the level design. Die Hard 2 is a light gun rail shooter in the same vein as Virtua Cop. The action is pretty good, with the major downside being that there is no light gun support on the PS1, and you had to play with a controller. The shooting presentation is still solid with good blood effects and decent sound. The best part about the shooting in Die Hard 2 is that it really shows off the destructible environments. There's plenty of windows to break, and many of the objects can be shot at and destroyed like TVs. The most impressive aspect of this is how you can shoot out the ceiling panels, and if they land on an enemy, they will instantly kill them. You are armed with a pistol, grenades, and a rocket launcher. You can pick up other weapons like machine guns and shotguns from dead enemies. One interesting aspect is how there are hidden paths in each of the levels. For example, at the start of level 1, if you can kill all of the enemies without shooting any of the civilians, you will fight a bit more outside and get access to other items. I do not have much to say when it comes to Die Hard 2. The gameplay is simple and fun, with the only real downside coming from having to play on a controller.
Someone give me some acid.
Die Hard 3 centers all of its gameplay on the driving. You will mainly be focused on driving to bombs to defuse them or chasing vehicles. The driving itself is rather janky and feels very imprecise. You will feel like you are fighting the controls the entire time. There are some nice details in this that I liked. For example, while in first-person view, blood will end up on your windshield when you hit someone, and then your wipers will turn on to remove it. It is impressive how large the city is, but the game always has you on a timer, and you never really get to appreciate the scale of it because of this. While I do think it was a cool conceptual idea to focus all of the gameplay for Die Hard 3 on driving, I do think that if it mixed in some shooting, it would have made this section of the game more interesting. I also find the map to not be as useful as the one found in Die Hard 1. For me, this is easily the worst part of the trilogy package. I love the Die Hard 3 film, but the game not so much. Before we move to the conclusion, I want to praise the soundtrack. The soundtrack is engaging and fuels the action and arcade nature very well. Here are a few tracks from the game. The Die Hard trilogy is a janky yet underrated game. The attempt to provide 3 unique forms of gameplay for each of the films is very commendable. Die Hard 1 is easily the best out of the bunch with the fun third-person arcadey action, and has a lot of replay value. Die Hard 2 works well as a light gun shooter, along with the alternative paths that you can find, but the lack of light gun support was an odd omission. Die Hard 3 is the weakest of the bunch, even though the scale of the cities is impressive for the time. The driving feels the most unrefined. These young developers mostly delivered on their high concept idea, and delivered a quality movie tie-in game that is fun to return back to even today. I recommend Die Hard Trilogy. If you are interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.